नमस्कार दोस्तों, आज के इस नए लेक्चर में आप सभी का स्वागत है। आज का जो लेक्चर है वो कम्युनिकेशन स्किल जो कि अपना पीजी में पढ़ाया जाने वाला एक पीजीएस का सब्जेक्ट है। तो आज हम उसके बारे में पढ़ने वाले हैं। ओके, सो चलिए लेक्चर को स्टार्ट करते हैं। सो फर्स्ट we should discuss about communication meaning. Right? What is the communication? So communication is the most integral part of human nature. Okay, so communication is most integral part of human nature. Human being have a compulsory urge to communicate with each other, as more than 70% of their time is spent in communicating. तो जो ह्यूमन होता है वो अपना 70% अपने टाइम का 70% वो टाइम स्पेंड करता है किसमें? कम्युनिकेटिंग में with others. Okay, so meaningful understanding is possible without communication. Of all the creators, man has the ability and power to express in words. So the evolution of mankind is basically the story of her progress in communication methods. So the dictionary meaning of communication is to exchange or convey, or you can say information or feelings by oration, by oration, writing or other means to disseminate data. Communication play a vital role right from our childhood. जो कम्युनिकेशन है वो इम्पोर्टेंट रोल प्ले करता है जो कि हमारे चाइल्डहुड से ही होता है. It is not only a specific tool which is essential for our survival but also a basis right. This modern age of communication is characterized by speed, efficiency, and the ability of transcend physical or geographical limitation. Okay, so when you become a part of any organization, you need to communicate, obviously बात है, and communicate effectively. So the better your communication skills, the greater your chance of quick progress. अगर आपकी जितनी बेटर कम्युनिकेशन स्किल होगी उतना ही चांस होगा कि आप जहाँ भी इंटरव्यू या किसी जॉब पर्पज से जा रहे हैं तो वहाँ आपकी सिलेक्शन की जो चांसेस जो होते हैं वो ज़्यादा हो जाते हैं. So the better your communication skill, the greater your chance to quick progress. So for your instance, you may possess an excellent academic records. You may not emerge victorious in an interview if you are not able to express your ideas clearly to those on the other sides of the table. People at Pinnacle have excellent communication skills. This is the reason for their rapid success. So now, characteristics of communication. So communication is a continuous process जो कि अपन कंटिन्यू करते रहते हैं. Sharing or exchanging information is a continuous process. या हम कह सकते हैं इट इज द शेयरिंग और एक्सचेंजेस exchanging information is a continuous process, and second one is effective communication is two way process. इफेक्टिव कम्युनिकेशन होता है वो टू वे प्रोसेस होता है. कम्युनिकेशन इज said to be effective when there is some kind of feedback mechanism. ठीक है, आपका जो कम्युनिकेशन है वो इफेक्टिव तब होगा जब उसमें फीडबैक शामिल होगा, ऐड होगा, then it will be more effective. Now, third one is communication is always with context and relationship aspect, both in terms of what you say and how you say the matter. Same message can be communicated uh, authoritatively or politely. For example, while asking for a glass of water, one can say, "Please bring me a glass of water." And इसका सेकेंड आप कैसे बोल सकते हैं? "Give me a glass of water." "Can I have a glass of water?" and "Could you please give me a glass of water?" मतलब एक ही शब्द को एक्सप्रेस कई तरीके से आप कर सकते हैं. Each message will have different effect on the person you are talking to. जितने भी ये वर्ड्स हैं इन सभी के बोलने के अलग अलग एक्सप्रेशन पड़ेंगे. So common language, this helps developing better understanding between the sender and the receiver of a message, and thus making communication more effective. Common language क्या होता है? ये this helps developing better understanding between the sender and the receiver of a message, and thus making communication more effective. Hmm. And fifth point क्या है आपका? Communication can also be conducted through gestures. Communication should not necessarily be verbal or written. Nodding of heads, rolling of eyes, movement of lips, etc. are some of the gestures used to convey certain basic ideas. Now, what is the technical communication? What is the technical communication? So, it plays a pivotal role in an organization, whether it is a business, an industry, or an academic institution, or yeah, or all marginal or administrative activities involve communication, be it planning, organizing, recruiting, coordinating or decision making. When you write reports, give instructions, or read brochures and manuals, you are involved in the process of communication. Hmm. So the more you participate in communication process, the better you develop your skill in collecting and organizing information, analyzing and evaluating fact. So the higher you position, greater is you need to communicate effectively. And technical communication in an organization can be divided into two parts. First one is oral and second one is written. So both are equally important, as it can not be specified which of these is used more in a organization. So difference between general and technical communication. So first one is general communication. So general communication contains a general message. It is informal in style and approach, and it has not set pattern of communication. It is mostly oral and not always for a specific audience. So it does not involve the use of technical vocabulary of graphic, etc. Now, technical communication. So technical communication contains technical message. ये क्या रखता है? टेक्निकल मैसेज रखता है. इट इज मोस्टली फॉर्मल होता है. ये कैसा होता है? ये फॉर्मल होता है. वो कैसा होता है? नॉन फॉर्मल होता है. इट फॉलोज अ सेट ऑफ पैटर्न. एंड ये क्या करता है? फॉलो करता है सेट ऑफ पैटर्न को. एक फॉलो करता है, एक पैटर्न में होता है. एंड इट इज बोथ फॉर्म ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन, ओरल एंड रिटन. जो आपका टेक्निकल कम्युनिकेशन है वो ओरल एंड रिटन दोनों होता है. एंड ऑलवेज फॉर अ स्पेसिफिक ऑडियंस. और ये क्या होता है? स्पेसिफिक ऑडियंस के लिए होता है. इफ इट फ्रिक्वेंटली इन्वॉल्व jargon and graphics etc. Now process of communication. So communication is a system that we face or doing daily life by the business contact with others in any official work etc. Normally it is the act of transferring of any information from one place, group or person to another. We communicate by the process. It is called communication process. It is the key of developing any functions management or any event. Element or effective communication. So element और effective of communication, मतलब effective of communication के क्या क्या element हो सकते हैं उसके बारे में देखेंगे. तो पहला element है first one is sender, second one is message, third one is encoding, fourth one is channel, receiver, decoding, feedback and noise. So this is the most important, which is feedback. Okay. So encoding and decoding, ये देखो आपका फिगर दे रखा है. So first one is sender, message, channel and receiver. This is your response. Feedback, the process of communication. Channel and semantic. Noise कैसी होती है? Channel and semantic आपकी noise हो गई. Now sender और encoder, इसके बारे में देखेंगे. So encodes the message information from its source. जो sender या encoder होता है वो क्या करता है? Encodes the message or information from its source. Source क्या है? Fact, feeling, thought, event and requirements that are created or helped or expected to happen. So known as source. Now third one is encoding. First one is sender. Okay. First one is sender, second one is source, and third one is encoding. So what is encoding? Process of converting the information into an appropriate form like word, symbols, gestures is known as encoding. Now fourth one is message. That what is message? It is the information that sender passes on to the receiver. तो ये इंफॉर्मेशन होता है जो सेंडर क्या करता है? पास करता है. मीन ये कहाँ होता है? सेंडर टू रिसीवर. इसको जो पास होता है वही तुम्हारा क्या होता है? मैसेज. ठीक, ये आपका मैसेज हो गया. ठीक. नाउ फिफ्थ वन इज चैनल. मेथड और मीडियम यूज टू ट्रांसमिटिंग और सेंडिंग मैसेज लाइक फेस टू फेस और ओरल और रिटन and so on. So these are the channel. Now sixth one is decoding. Process by which receiver perceives and interprets the message is known as decoding. And seventh one is receiver. So person whom message was sent or delivered, the communication is complete when he receives it. अगर आपका जो रिसीवर है वो मैसेज को रिसीव कर लेता है देन आपका कम्युनिकेशन कंप्लीट हो जाता है. नाउ एट्थ वन इज नॉइज. व्हाट इज द नॉइज? फैक्टर दैट डिस्टर्ब्स और कंफ्यूज और इंटरफेयर विद कम्युनिकेशन आर नोन एज नॉइज. तो जो फैक्टर हैं जो कि कम्युनिकेशन को डिस्टर्ब करते हैं या कंफ्यूज करते हैं और इंटरफेयर करते हैं वो क्या कहलाता है? नॉइज कहलाता है. Now ninth and most important one is feedback. U-turns जिसको बोलते हैं U-turn of communication. It's the U-turn of communication by receiving the role of sender to receiver. Receiver's response to sender. इसमें क्या है? जैसे आपने कोई मैसेज है, ठीक है, सेंडर ने रिसीवर को कोई मैसेज सेंड किया, ठीक है. अब वो मैसेज तक पहुंचा और उसका क्या रिस्पॉन्स रहा, उसके लिए मान लो मैसेज में कुछ भी रहा हो, तो उसके लिए अगर उसका वो रिप्लाई दे दे उसको कि हाँ आपने ये मैसेज भेजा था, इसमें ये कमियां हैं या जो भी चीज़ें हैं, या आपने जो भेजा था वो प्रॉपर चीज़ें थी, ठीक है, वो प्रॉपर करेक्ट थी, उसके बारे में अपना कोई रिस्पॉन्स दे दे या फीडबैक दे दे, ठीक है, तो वो आपका एक प्रॉपर कम्युनिकेशन हो जाता है, वो एक सक्सेसफुल कम्युनिकेशन माना जाता है। तो फीडबैक इसीलिए काफ़ी इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाता है। सो यू टर्न ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन बाय रिवर्टिंग द रोल ऑफ सेंडर टू रिसीवर रिस्पॉन्स टू सेंडर्स द कम्युनिकेशन इज फुल्ली इफेक्टिव, देन क्या हो जाएगा, फुल्ली इफेक्टिव हो जाएगा ओनली व्हेन देयर इज अ डिजायर्ड रिस्पॉन्स फ्रॉम द रिसीवर्स। अगर रिसीवर ने अपना रिस्पॉन्स भेज दिया सेंडर को, तो आपका जो कम्युनिकेशन है वो काफ़ी इफेक्टिव होता है। So the communication process, how message travel from one person to another. Okay, so ये आपका ये सोर्स हो गया, इसके बाद इनकोडिंग, चैनल, डिकोडिंग एंड रिसीवर। रिसीवर क्या करता है, वो आपका फीडबैक देता है किसको, सेंडर को, ठीक है। सेंडर क्या करता है, वो मैसेज सेंड करता है रिसीवर को। इसके बीच में आपका आ गया चैनल, इनकोडिंग, फिर इनकोडिंग होती है, फिर चैनल होता है, फिर डिकोडिंग होती है। इसके बीच में जो नॉइज होती है, नॉइज क्या करती है, वो डिस्टर्ब करती है, ठीक है, कम्युनिकेशन को। तो ये आपका चैनल हो गया। नाउ इसेंशियल्स ऑफ इफेक्टिव कम्युनिकेशन। इफेक्टिव कम्युनिकेशन के लिए क्या इसेंशियल्स होने चाहिए? फर्स्ट वन इज वेल डिफाइंड इन्वायरमेंट, जो इन्वायरमेंट है कैसा होना चाहिए, वेल डिफाइंड होना चाहिए। सेकेंड वन इज कोऑपरेशन बिटवीन सेंडर टू एंड रिसीवर, cooperation between sender and receiver. Now third one is selection of an appropriate channel. Fourth one is correct encoding and decoding of the message. And fifth one is feedback. अगर ये पांचों हैं आपकी कम्युनिकेशन में, communication is then your communication will be effective. Now look at the carefully. This is your communication and types of communication. चैनल, डायरेक्शन एंड मेथड्स। चैनल कौन कौन से थे, तो फॉर्मल हो सकते हैं, अनफॉर्मल हो सकते हैं। डायरेक्शन क्या, डाउनवर्ड हो सकता है, अपवर्ड हो सकता है, एंड हॉरिजेंटल हो सकता है, डायगोनल हो सकता है। मेथड्स कौन से हैं, ओरल हो सकता है या रिटन हो सकता है या गेस्चरल हो सकता है। ये तो आपके कम्युनिकेशन के टाइप्स हो गए। चैनल के टाइप्स फॉर्मल, इनफॉर्मल हो सकते हैं। डायरेक्शन डाउनवर्ड, अपवर्ड, हॉरिजेंटल एंड डायगोनल। एंड मेथड्स ओरल हो सकता है, रिटन हो सकता है और गेस्चर हो सकता है। ओके, सो नाउ बैरियर ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन। कम्युनिकेशन में जो बैरियर्स आती हैं वो क्या है, ठीक है। सो फर्स्ट वन इज अ फिजिकल बैरियर। सो फर्स्ट वन इज फिजिकल बैरियर। ओके, फिजिकल बैरियर क्या है भाई? सो अ कम्युनिकेशन इज अ टू वे प्रोसेस, डिस्टेंस बिटवीन द सेंडर टू रिसीवर of the message is an important barrier to communication. Noise and environmental factor also block the communication. ठीक है, नॉइज एक फिजिकल बैरियर हो सकता है एंड इन्वायरमेंटल फैक्टर हो सकता है जो कि ब्लॉक कर देता है कम्युनिकेशन को। ये फिजिकल बैरियर हो गया। नाउ सेकंड वन इज पर्सनल बैरियर। पर्सनल फैक्टर्स लाइक डिफरेंस इन जजमेंट, सोशल वैल्यू एंड inferiority complex and bias or attitude or pressure of time and inability to communicate, etc. Widen the psychological distance between the communicator and the communicate credibility gap. For example, inconsistency between what one says and what one does also act as a barrier to communication, is the personal barriers. So third one is a semantic or language barrier. So semantic barrier usually arise when the information is not in simple language and contain those words or symbols that have multiple meanings. Following are the main language barriers. तो देखो सेमेंटिक और लैंग्वेज बैरियर्स वो होते हैं इसमें मान लो कोई वर्ड्स है जिसके मल्टीपल मीनिंग्स है। तो मान लो रन, रन एक एग्जांपल ले लो, तो उसमें क्या है, रन का कई मतलब हो सकता है। सो ये आपका सिमेंटिक और लैंग्वेज बैरियर्स के अंदर आ जाएगा। अभी कई टाइप्स के होते हैं। फर्स्ट वन इज, ये देखो सिमेंटिक बैरियर हो गया आपका, ठीक है। तो ये आपका हो सकता है वर्ड्स विद डिफरेंट मीनिंग्स, faulty translation हो सकता है, unclear assumptions हो सकते हैं, denotations and connotations हो सकता है, technical jargons हो सकता है, and bad expressions ये भी आपका हो सकता है। तो ये semantic और लैंग्वेज बैरियर्स के टाइप्स हो गए, ठीक है। नाउ फर्स्ट वन इज बैड एक्सप्रेशन। हाँ, व्हाट इज द बैड एक्सप्रेशन? सो द मैसेज इज नॉट formulated properly. Message is not formulated properly, and the language is so difficult that it could be misinterpreted by the recipient. The message is said to be badly expressed if the wrong words are chosen, the sentences are not sequenced properly, and there is a frequent repetition of words or sentence. So the badly expressed message consume a lot of time as it requires uh, corrections and clarification, and also the impact of the message gets reduced. Hmm? Now, second one is symbol or words with different meanings. So there are several words that carry different meanings, and often people get confused with these words and interpret these differently due to the difference in their educational and social backgrounds. So, such as the words crane has different meanings, such shown as the sentence below. The bird sanctuaries is full of cranes. The builder used a crane to lift heavy steel rods. And third one is the girl has to crane her neck to watch the movie. So these are the different meaning of one words. So third one is faulty translation. Faulty translation. Sometimes the sender translates the message as per his level of understanding, irrespective of recipients and compressions, comprehensions level. For example, a manager collected information from his superior and subordinates and translated that same information to all his employees according to the understanding level of the superiors, and this lead to the misinterpretation of the message. So thus it is required to mold the message according to the understanding level of the employees to have an intended response. Now fourth one is uncleared assumptions. So sometimes the sender create assumptions about certain things which they feel the receivers must be knowing about it and focus only on the subject matter. But in the case of a special message, if the assumptions are vague and unknown to the receiver, then the communication might get adversely affected. Now fifth one is denotations and connotations. So the denotations means the literal meaning of the word. It just shows the name of the object and does not imply any negative positive qualities. So the denotations barriers arise due to the sender and receiver using a different definition and meaning of the word used to the message, such as words crane is used in context of birds species, but it is the interpreted as a vehicle that lifts the object. So whereas the implied meaning of word is connotation that arouses personal reaction and qualitative judgment. The connotation barriers arise when the people use words that hold different meaning in different objects, situations, context, feelings, etc. For example, the word beautiful and confidence has a positive connotation but can have any of the meaning depending on the context which it is used. So now sixth one is a technical jargons. Often people working in the technical groups such as engineers, production manager, IT managers, etc. use the technical jargons in their communication, which is quite difficult for the layman to understand. Thus, the use of technical jargons in communication can act as a barrier. Now, fourth one is status barriers, which is also known as a superior subordinate relationship. So, status or positions in the hierarchy of an organization is one of the fundamental barriers that obstruct free flow of the information. A superior may give only selected information to his subordinates so as to maintain status differences. So subordinate usually tend to convey only those things which his superior would appreciate. So this creates distortions in upward communication. Such selective communication is also known as flirting. Sometimes the superior feels that he cannot fully admit to his subordinate those problems, conditions, or result which may affect adversely on the ability and judgment to do so. Would you underline his positions as a superior being in the formal organization? So this causes distortions in downward communication. So a subordinate may also feel reluctant to report his shortcoming or may not seek clarification on the instructions, which are subject to different interpretations for fear of loss of prestige in the eyes of the superior. Now, fifth one is organizational barriers. So, organizational barriers refers to the hindrance in the flow of information among the employees that might result a commercial failure of the organization. The major organization barriers are listed below. So, first one is a organizational barrier. So, these are the rule of policies, hierarchical positions, organizational faculties, and complex organizational structure. Now, sixth one is barrier due to the inadequate attention. Inadequate attention to the message make communication less effective, and the message is likely to be misunderstood. The simple failure to read notice, my minutes and reports is also a common features. So whatever we the reason communication remains only one way process, and there is no understanding of the message. If the receiver pay little attention to the message in the words or Josephine Druher, listening the most neglected skill of communication. Half listening is like racing your uh, engine with the gear natural. You use coastline. What you get now where. Now seventh one is premature evolution. So some people have a tendency to form a judgment before listening to the entire message. So this is known as premature evolution. So as discussed in previous point, half listening is like racing your engine with gear in neutral. You have used gasoline, but you get nowhere. A premature evolution distorts understanding and act as barrier to effective communication. Okay, so now here's one is emotional attribute attitude. So barrier may also arise due to emotional attitude because when emotions are strong, it is difficult to know that frame of mind of other persons or group. Emotional attitude of both the communicators as well as the recipient obstruct free flow of transmissions and understanding of message. Now, ninth one is resistance of change, resistance to change. It is the general tendency of human being to stick uh, to hold a customary uh, pattern of life. So they may resist change to maintain status quo. Thus, when new ideas are being communicated to introduce a change, it is likely to be overlooked or even opposed. This resistance to change create an important obstacle to effective communication. Now, 10th number is barrier due to lack of mutual trust. So communication means sharing of ideas in common. When we communicate, we are trying to stabilize a common sense. Thus, we will freely transfer information and understanding with another only when there is a mutual trust between the two. When there is a lack of mutual trust between the communicator and recipient, the message is not fully credibility gaps. Inconsistency in saying and doing also cause lack of mutual trust, which act as basic obstacle to effective communication. Now, 11th number is physiological barrier. So, what is the physiological barrier? So, physiological or environmental barrier refers to the physiological state, opinions, attitudes, status, consequences, consequent, consequent, consequences, emotions, etc. of a person that deeply affect the ability of communicate. So the communication is largely depend on the mental condition of persons. If the person is not mentally or emotionally sound, then he cannot communicate effectively either as a sender or a receiver. So the main kinds of physiological or emotional barrier are: first one is a lack of attention, premature evolution, poor retention, loss by transmission, destruct and emotion. These are the physiological emotional barrier. Hmm? So first one is lack of attention. So when uh, the person is preoccupied by some other things and do not listen carefully what the other person is speaking, then arise the physiological barrier in the communication. When the person does not listen to other, then he won't able to comprehend the message as it was intended and will not be able to give proper feedback. So second one is a premature evolution. Many people have a tendency to jump to the conclusion directly and form judgment without considering all the aspect of information. So this is generally done by the people who are impotent and resort to a selective listening. So this premature evolution of the information act as a barrier to effective communication and lowers the moral of the sender. Now third one is poor retention. So the retention refers to the capacity of a brain to retain or storage things in the memory. The brain does not store all the information came across, but in fact retain only those which deems to be helpful in the future. So therefore, much of the information gets lost during a retention process, and this act a barrier to the effective communication. So now fourth point is a loss of transmission. So the loss of transmission means whenever the information exchange hand it, its credibility reduces. It is most often observed in case of an oral communication where people handle information carelessly and transmit the information which has lost some of its truth. Thus, the improper lack of information being transmitted to others act as hindrance in communication process. Now, fifth one is a destruct. So to have an effective communication, it is the must that both the communicators, senders and receivers trust each other. In case there is a lack of trust between both the parties, then they will tend to drive negative meaning out of the message and often ignore what has been communicated. If the receiver has not trust, then he will not listen to whatever is being said by the sender, and this will result in meaningless communication. Now, sixth and last one is emotion. So, communication is greatly influenced by the emotions of a person. So, आज के लेक्चर में बस इतना ही था. बाकी मिलते हैं नेक्स्ट लेक्चर में. कम्युनिकेशन का जो नेक्स्ट लेक्चर होगा उसमें मिलते हैं. तो बाकी आज के लेक्चर में बस इतना ही था. बाकी तब तक आप लोग अपना ध्यान रखिए. नमस्कार.